Korean author Han Kang released a new book last month titled Light and Thread, or 빛과 실 in Korean, the first publication since winning the 2024 Nobel Prize in Literature as the first Asian woman in Nobel history. No surprise, it's become an immediate bestseller, while her previous works are also still flying off the shelves. Now today, we want to talk about the Nobel laureate and the ongoing post-Nobel boom with David Tizzard, professor of Korean Studies at Seoul Women's University and Hanyang University, who is now connected with us online. Hello, Professor Tizzard.
Hello, Professor.
Good afternoon. Great to see you both. Thank you for having me back again to talk about a wonderful subject.
Right. Great to see you, Professor Tizzard. Now, author Han Kang was mentioned a number of times during other topics we discussed. For instance, last time when we talked about culture on Jeju Island. That's how big of an impact she's been exerting. And you've read a number of her books as well, maybe all of them. So what about the new one, Light and Thread? What's it about and what do you think of it?
It's amazing that there is such focus on a Korean literary figure. Let me just start by saying that it's undeniable and it's well-deserved, the attention that Han Kang is getting. The spotlight is on her, but also Korean literature more broadly. And these are important works of literature that she has produced to date. Now, with Light and Thread, unlike any of her other work, maybe the White Book comes close, we're presented with a collection. This is not a novel per se, but it's previously published poems, essays, notes, even her Nobel acceptance speech is in there, Light and Thread. And it's thoughtful, certainly. It's meditative, but it's also somewhat scattered. The cohesion isn't there. So if you go into Han Kang, if people are hearing about her for the first time and they're trying to explore this wonderful storyteller, this wonderful excavator of Korean history and culture that's given readers all around the world so much to ponder and think about with her very unique voice, they might find this one a little bit of a struggle because of that lack of cohesion. Sometimes with artists, especially like Han Kang, you run the risk of having too much of a good thing. The mystique somewhat begins to dilute. That all being said, for anybody that does love Han Kang's work and her writing, and I'm one of them, this is just another thing to add to the ever-growing collection. And sometimes you want to embrace these readers, these writers as much as you can. You want to get every little bit of them, and that's what this latest collection, Light and Thread, does for us.
I'll have to agree with you on most of that you said regarding the new book, because I've just completed reading it, Light and Thread, and I thought it's great in a way that you learn more about the author herself, because much of it is memos or extracts of her journal. So if there is anyone who hasn't read Han Kang yet, I would rather recommend Vegetarian, for instance, because that's where you can see more of her literary work, and that would be my recommendation to you, Walter.
Yeah, but also it is that sort of curse, you know, after you win the Academy Award, what is your next performance going to be? Is it going to be as good as your, Academy Award winning presentation? You know, the pressure is on for you to do the next best thing after you won one of the top prizes of that field. So the pressure is on for Han indeed. But obviously, this might be an easy question to answer, but Han's new book became a bestseller in bookstores, both offline and online, of course. Was this an expected result, do you think?
No, absolutely. When Han Kang releases a book these days, she's no longer just a novelist, let's say. She's a daepyo. She's a national literary figure. And there's also, in this country, a real sense of pride in her achievements. There's sort of a collective literary solidarity that centers around her. So when she publishes something new, even if it's not a traditional novel, but rather a collection of essays, poems, and speeches, people pay attention. There's a cultural momentum behind her now, and bookstores stockpile her releases. Media outlets such as yourself often give her top billing, and readers all over the country and abroad as well, perhaps out of admiration, perhaps out of obligation, they buy her book en masse. And I think this is quite admirable, this national literary solidarity. And so while the sales were predictable, I do wonder about the reception of it. Light and Thread, as we've said, is more fragmentary. It's more introspective. Some might point to it being a little bit more indulgent, perhaps, because it doesn't offer that same narrative or emotional cohesion that former works did. And so while the patriot in me takes great pleasure in seeing a Korean author dominate these charts, the critic in me wonders, are we engaging with the work, or are we simply celebrating the author? Because there's a subtle but important difference between the two. And Walter mentioned that follow-up, that second album syndrome. How do you do that sophomore one? That seems to be part of it. And also part of me wonders on a personal level whether this is being pushed by publishing companies looking to cash in on these things, or if this is coming from Han Kang's own desire to put more of her work out there herself. Because again, just like celebrating the work or the author, I think there's also a difference between those two perspectives.
And speaking of publishers, there was a surge in book purchases and readership ever since Han Kang won the Nobel Prize back in October, and the Han Kang effect has been blowing ever since. We've been experiencing open runs at bookstores, which we probably haven't seen in the past years. So can we say that the Han Kang boom is revitalizing the bookstore and publishing industry in overall?
Yes, we absolutely can, because I spend a lot of time in bookstores and they're as busy as ever, despite what people might say. And this is a wonderful thing. It's not merely a media phrase, something that people throw about on television and social media. This is a phenomenon with tangible effects. There are lines at bookstores, there are spikes in sales, and a genuine curiosity about literature again. And that's something to be celebrated, especially in a society often dominated by tech and trends and test scores. On a personal level, as a professor that, has to assign readings to students, Han Kang helps me immensely, because I can point to the importance of literature and South Korea's achievements in this field. So thank you very much, Han Kang, for that on a personal level. However, I will just say this, guys, while it's tempting to romanticize this as a literary renaissance, we should pause and ask, how deep is this revival? Are we witnessing a sustained engagement with literature, or is this just a momentary cultural selfie? Because it's one thing to have open runs at Kyobo Bookstore. It's another thing to actually have those books being read, discussed, and lived with. So I give all credit to Han Kang and the country for responding in this way. It's a genuinely beautiful thing. But I wonder, is this a cultural movement that's going to last? Is it something more enduring? Or is it perhaps just this idea that people want to be seen with books, people want to show national solidarity to this writer? That's something that will only be answered in the years ahead as we see the effects of this Han Kang syndrome and the phenomenon.
Yes, it's great to see people go back into bookstores when we all thought that, it's now the digital age and people are just going on their phones or their tablets. But let's go to back in March now, when Gwangju Tourism Organization announced a pilot tourism program based on Han Kang's book, The Human Acts, which deals with the May 18th democratization movement. Now, so the Han Kang effect has had an impact not only on the publishing industry, but on many other sectors like tourism, it seems.
Yeah, and again, this is where the phenomenon, as I said in the previous answer, Walter, it becomes tangible, and there are real effects of this. Something significant is happening. The Gwangju Tourist Organization's decision to base a program around human acts, in Korean Sonyeonyeonda, A Boy Is Coming, is a testament to Han Kang's cultural power. But more importantly, from my perspective, it signals a shift in how Korea is willing to confront and communicate its past. It's not through sanitized slogans, cherry blossom festivals, and K-pop concerts. Not that there's anything wrong with K-pop and cherry blossoms, they're wonderful. But that Gwangju is willing to do this through the raw, unflinching lens of trauma and resistance. That's a brilliant thing, because there's something deeply admirable about that. Gwangju is not a theme park. It's a scar in the nation's memory and history. Those three numbers that you've just mentioned, Oil Pal, they've left a deep, tangible effect on this nation's collective psyche. So that they're willing to engage history and Han Kang in that way, I think is, it's almost like Korea saying, this is who we are, fragile, brave, wounded, proud, and we won't shy away from it. And the country has Han Kang to face for that, because she has very bravely put a voice to Korea's past and its traumas. It's very easy to demonize those outside, but Han Kang reminded us that sometimes the monsters are those within, and she did that so powerfully. Of course, as a professor, I should say there's a danger of this becoming commodified, turned into yet sort of another Instagrammable moment for people visiting Gwangju. But overall, if this is done right, the blending of literature, memory and tourism, that could serve as a model for how other countries could also deal with their past, not by burying them, but by putting them on show, as Han Kang has allowed us to do.
And finally, Professor Tizzard, after Han's great achievement, the Korean government has increased its budget regarding translation and publishing, especially publishing abroad, and this to globalize Korean literature. So do you think the overseers, the view of overseers regarding Korean literature has changed? And also, is there a way we could, make Korean literature even more widely known abroad?
Yeah, absolutely. So Han Kang's victory with the Nobel Prize, it didn't just put her on the map. It shifted the borders of the map itself. Suddenly, Korean literature is not some niche curiosity or academic afterthought to be found in pages of esoteric journals. Now, Korean literature is at the center of a global literary discourse, and people want to know about it. And this affects how publishers select manuscripts, how readers approach translated fiction, and literary critics approach their reviews. Let's just say, though, this is very important, that this didn't happen overnight. Han Kang stands on the shoulders of giants. This is the result of years, even decades of quiet work by translators, publishers, and writers who all built up this collection for Korea to be where it is today. Han Kang has sort of pushed the door wide open and stepped over the line, but there was a lot of work done by writers before that. The Korean government, as you said, it's now increasing its translation budget. That is the right move and a good one. If you're serious about soft power, that's the thing to do. Perhaps what might be important is to go further, a diversity in what's being translated, not just award winners, not just Seoul-centric voices, but regional authors, experimental writers. I might also add male writers, because in the Korean literature field, there's a really kind of heavy focus on feminist literature, LGBT literature, and this is really good. This is amazing. Diversifying that, it will be the next challenge for them, but, if Korea has shown us anything thus far, and Han Kang herself, that they are up for this challenge, and I'm so glad to see people reading again and talking about books on television.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Tizzard, for sharing your thoughts on the Han Kang effect with us today. And I can't help but notice that you mentioned patriotism frequently when we deal with culture. And I have to say, who isn't proud about K-pop being recognized in almost all corners around the world? But if we see that happening with K-literature in the years to come, I think that patriotism will rise another level. Well, thank you very much again for your thoughts and insights today.
Thank you, Professor.
Have a great day, guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
And thank you, Walter, as always. So we're going to see you back here tomorrow.
See you very soon.